right, so let's turn to the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel, I've been thinking about doing this for a long time, studying Ezekiel. It's a really challenging book, which is one reason why I haven't done it. I don't know that I've ever heard a sermon from Ezekiel. Someone might think it's not all that relevant to our lives. Maybe that's why people don't cover it. But there's always things you can learn along the way that will be relevant and that do apply. So this, I have to say, Ezekiel is probably one of the most difficult books in all of the Bible to interpret. It deals with prophecy for Israel, some end times prophecy, and like I said before, instead of going over verse by verse and slowly going through a verse by verse, which would take probably a long time, this is going to be more of a broad overview. So each week, maybe we'll cover 3 or 4 chapters this morning. I'm not sure. Some weeks we might cover 10 chapters. I don't know. We're just going to have to see how it goes. But I want to start by listening along to chapter 1. So just read along, follow along, and this is Ezekiel 1. As you're listening, maybe write a note or a question that you might have, something that stands out. Because again, it's challenging to really figure out what is happening here and what he's talking about. So let's listen to Ezekiel chapter 1.
The Book of Ezekiel.
Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God.
On the 5th day of the month, which was in the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there.
Then I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, and radiating out of its midst like the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also from within it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings on their 4 sides, and each of the 4 had faces and wings. Their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. And each of the 4 had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces. Their wings stretched upward. 2 wings of each one touched one another, and 2 covered their bodies. And each one went straight forward. They went wherever the Spirit wanted to go, and they did not turn when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches going back and forth among the living creatures. The fire was bright, and out of the fire went lightning. And the living creatures ran back and forth, in appearance like a flash of lightning. Now as I looked at the living creatures, behold, a wheel was on the earth, beside each living creature, with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their workings was like the color of beryl, and all 4 had the same likeness. The appearance of their workings was, as it were, a wheel in the middle of a wheel. When they moved, they went toward any one of 4 directions. They did not turn aside when they went. As for their rims, they were so high, they were awesome. And their rims were full of eyes, all around the 4 of them. When the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went, because there the Spirit went. And the wheels were lifted together with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When those went, these went. When those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up together with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. The likeness of the firmament above the heads of the living creatures was like the color of an awesome crystal stretched out over their heads, and under the firmament their wings spread out straight, one toward another. Each one had 2, which covered one side, and each one had 2, which covered the other side of the body. When they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of many waters, like the voice of the Almighty, a tumult like the noise of an army. And when they stood still, they let down their wings. A voice came from above the firmament that was over their heads. Whenever they stood, they let down their wings. And above the firmament, over their heads, was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. Also from the appearance of his waist and upward, I saw, as it were, the color of amber, with the appearance of fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward, I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire, with brightness all around, like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of one speaking.
It's like, what did I get myself into starting this? All right. So just remember, Ezekiel is seeing a vision of God, a vision of God's throne room. These are things he's never seen before, things that I suspect even he doesn't understand. But he's doing his best to explain what he sees, right? So if you had a vision of heaven, things, what are you going to say? You're going to do your best to write down, explain what you saw. So that's what's happening here. Did anything jump out at you? Are there any questions that are in your mind after reading this chapter, other than what in the world is going on? Okay, let me give just a brief overview or outline of the book. So one person outlined it this way. It begins with prophecies of Jerusalem's ruin. So that's going to start, I think, more so in chapter 4, because the children of Israel had been worshiping idols. They had rebelled against God, and now God was bringing judgment upon the nation. So this happened around the year 586, when Babylon came in, destroyed the city of Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and even before that, captives were taken into Babylon. So that's the main prophecy of Ezekiel, is judgment upon the nation of Judah. That's the first part of the book. The second are prophecies of retribution to the nation, so just warning them. Next, provision for Israel's repentance. So Ezekiel's telling them, you've sinned against God, God is judging you, you need to turn from your evil ways. And then the last part of the book are prophecies of Israel's restoration. So it starts out with judgment for what they've done, and then eventually it's going to end more on a positive note, that Israel is going to be restored. Because if you know their history, after they were led captive into Babylon, how long were they in Babylon for?
70 years.
Right, 70 years. So they end up coming back, and the nation is restored eventually, so that hundreds of years later, then you get the story of Jesus and the disciples. So Ezekiel is going to work through these things, and we're going to, like I said, give a broad overview, not go chapter by chapter, verse by verse. So any other thoughts before we continue? All right, one theory, and I'm only repeating this because it's so common. If you've ever listened to some of these History Channel specials or the Bible Code, this stuff used to be on television. It might still be on TV, I don't know. I don't watch cable TV, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was common for them to try to come up with these theories about Ezekiel, that what Ezekiel was actually describing with the wheel within a wheel, he was actually describing UFOs. Okay, so no joke, that was actually a popular theory. What's that? Yeah, that it might have been, I'm sure they brought it up, but it wasn't just them. Is that the History Channel?
My uncle used to watch this.
Yeah. You guys, you guys familiar with the show Ancient Aliens? So instead of God, because these people will not allow the possibility for God. It can't be God. It can't be, the Bible can't be true. It can't be God. So therefore, we were created by aliens. So the chariot of fire in the Bible, that must have been a spaceship, and what Ezekiel is describing must be aliens, and yeah. Well, here's one thing we know. That is not what I'm not exactly sure what he's describing, but I'm pretty sure he's not describing that. Okay. So, but that is something that's out there, just so you know. All right, so the name Ezekiel means strengthened by God, and Ezekiel was not just a prophet, he was also a priest. He was one of two prophets who wrote while in exile in Babylon. Because he's in Babylon, right? We read that, by the river Chebar. So Ezekiel is writing while in exile. And who are the two prophets? Who's the other prophet that wrote while in Babylon? Daniel. Okay, so Ezekiel and Daniel wrote while in captivity. Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi, they wrote post-exile, so they wrote their books after the captivity. All the other prophets who have books in the Bible, they all wrote before the Babylonian captivity. So if that helps to follow along with the timeline, almost every prophet wrote before this. But Ezekiel's right in the middle of it, and like I said, he's actually in Babylon. So just a refresher on Israel's history. The northern nation, remember they were split under King who? You should remember this from a few Sundays ago.
Solomon.
Yes, Solomon. Yes, Saul ruled over the United Kingdom, then David, then Solomon. and it was Solomon's son who made poor decisions, and that's when the nation was divided. And Solomon's son's name begins with an R. Rehoboam, right. So the nation of Israel was divided, Israel to the north, Judah to the south. The northern nation of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians long before this. So the Assyrians conquered Israel around the year 722 BC, and the southern kingdom is what Ezekiel is talking about. So he's not addressing Israel, he's addressing Judah. So the southern kingdom eventually is going to fall in the year 586, and this is around the time Ezekiel's writing, so the 6th century BC. And it's also important to point out that Ezekiel was taken captive years before Jerusalem was actually destroyed. More on that later. So why did Ezekiel write? Let's look at verse 1, Ezekiel 1:1. God is calling him, commissioning him to be a prophet. It says, "Now it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month, of the 5th day of the month, and I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God." So the river splits off from the river Euphrates in Babylon. And the statement about the 30th year, does anyone have something in their Bible it's written a little different? Some translations has him saying, "in my 30th year." So it either says "in the 30th year" or "in my 30th year." And why would that matter? Yeah. So a lot of people believe, and this is probably true, this makes a lot of sense, that what Ezekiel is saying is that he's 30 years old, or he was 30 years old when this prophecy came to him. Why is the age 30 significant for a prophet? Or for a priest? Well, we know Jesus began his ministry when he was 30.
The year they're allowed to start work as a priest.
Right. It's generally accepted that in order to be a priest, I don't know about a prophet, but this was the rule for a teacher, a rabbi, a priest, that you couldn't be one until you're 30 years of age. So that makes a lot of sense if God is commissioning him. Now that you're 30, Ezekiel, now you have this mission, because now you're able to. Which, this isn't a rule repeated in the New Testament, but I think this would probably be a good idea for churches to have a general guideline that someone couldn't be a pastor until age 30. I know someone's probably going to disagree about that. Again, it's not a commandment in the New Testament. But because that was the pattern under the Old Covenant, it does make a lot of sense, because having a 20-year-old pastor might not be the most wise decision. Yeah.
And we even reflect that in our Constitution. You have to be over 30 years of age to be president, even to serve in the Senate.
Oh, in the U.S. Constitution?
There are age requirements for our politicians. They have to be in their 30s.
Yeah. Well, most of us are familiar that to be president, you have to be, what, 35. So if you think about it, I mean, this is kind of sad that in some ways with this, and I could talk about other things, but in some ways, a lot of churches have lower standards than we have in our government.
Government is no great shake sometimes.
Because, and I don't want to get too off topic, but I mean, this is one thing that comes up. If he's 30, nothing's in the Bible by accident, right? So there have been 18-year-old, 19-year-old men who are good speakers. They're charismatics. They're charismatic. They have connections, and they're able to build a church, plant a church, and by the time before they're 21, they're nationally known as these, some of the most famous pastors in our country have.
Deconstructing their faith.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing in the 90s, all these really young pastors and stuff, and now you're hearing about they've fallen away, they've gone apostate, all of this. But it's interesting to me because, I mean, the Bible says later, and I cannot give you the chapter and verse, where it says they cannot be a new believer. And new convert.
Right.
And it's just, I find in many of the churches I was a member at, there was always this, oh, this guy is really on fire for the Lord, let's make him an elder. And it's like, he got baptized 2 years ago, you want to make him an elder?
Right.
It's like, let him serve as a deacon, fixing stuff around the church for a couple of years first.
Right. Yeah, not a novice, it says. Now, I guess you could make the argument that if someone was saved at a young age, hey, I've been a Christian a long time, but still, 18, 19, 20, nothing against 19, 20-year-olds.
Brains aren't fully formed yet.
Yeah, we remember that from last week, right? They're not, it's true though, as when I was 18, I mean, I was an idiot when I was 18. Can you share that? Like, you don't want 18-year-old pastors.
That's the reason we say when I was young and stupid.
Right, right.
It allows time for maturity,
Yeah.
is what it does.
Of course, I didn't think I was at the time. I thought I knew everything, right? So this is one thing you can take away that does apply. And like you said, a lot of the younger pastors, and I'll just mention one, just because this is what comes to mind. There's a guy named Mark Driscoll who claimed, like Ezekiel, to receive visions from God. Do I think he actually received visions from God? Probably not. But Mark Driscoll claimed to receive a direct word from God, visions from God, a call from God at age 18 or 19. And he was one of these guys, young, hip, young, restless, and reformed was the movement. But you had all these young guys who were instantly famous. And yeah, you look back on it now, the things that happened, it was a total train wreck in most cases. So this is one thing I would take away from this. I do believe Ezekiel probably is around 30 years old here. And that's when he's starting his prophetic ministry, 30 years old. So I don't think that's in our Constitution. Maybe we should put it in there. Okay. All right, any more comments on that before we move on? All right. Yeah, Ray.
I don't think the hormones in anybody have settled down by age 25.
Yeah.
Still too much testosterone.
Maybe. Yeah, they'd be better as deacons and they can do work around the church rather than pastors. But okay, so Ezekiel was called by God. And of course, this is what it means to be a prophet, that he received a direct call. He's speaking God's literal word. Like, he received an actual vision. And I say actual and literal because it's just so common today for people. I hear it every single week. People saying God spoke to me and told me thus and such. So we hear that so often that the average Christian can get the idea that just God is just constantly talking to me. And usually what they are referring to is just thoughts and ideas in their head. I want to be careful at the same time. God does lead us. I'm not saying that God doesn't put thoughts in our mind. I mean, I think the devil can probably put thoughts in your mind. So I'm not against the idea that God can't do that or isn't doing that. But as far as receiving a literal word from God and speaking God's word, Ezekiel is a true prophet, because that's what a prophet is, someone who has a direct call and they are receiving what we call divine revelation. Just skip ahead to chapter 3. Ezekiel 3, 1 through 5. We see this here. He says, "Moreover, God, said to me, Son of man, eat what you find. Eat this scroll and go. Speak to the house of Israel." So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that scroll. And he said to me, "Son of man, feed your belly and fill your stomach with this scroll that I give you." So I ate, and it was in my mouth like honey in sweetness. Then he said to me, "Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. For you are not sent to a people of unfamiliar speech and of hard language, but to the house of Israel." Okay, so Ezekiel is told to eat a scroll. Do you think he actually ate a scroll? And of course, we don't have scrolls today. So in effect, this would be the same as, okay, Ezekiel, here's the Bible. Now eat it. Okay. This is a vision. He's not actually chewing on paper. We assume, right? But what's the obvious meaning here? This is my word. Take it in, and you're going to take it in, you're going to speak it. Okay, so obviously that's what he's talking about. Also, who's Ezekiel speaking to? Now, it is the nation of Judah that's taken captive, but Judah, Israel, I mean, it's the house of Israel. That's in verse 4. So, the nation is Judah, but the people, it's the house of Israel. Okay. So it's important to point out that most prophecy in the Old Testament, certainly, and this makes all the sense in the world because these prophets were prophets of the nation Israel to the nation Israel. Now, some prophets did go and speak to other nations, right? For example, who's the most well-known example of a prophet who was called to speak? Yes, Jonah was called to speak to the Assyrians in the city of Nineveh. But most of the prophets were speaking to the house of Israel. So therefore, most Bible prophecy, and that also includes end times Bible prophecy, most of it deals with Israel as a nation or Israel as a people. In the book of Revelation, it says that Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So obviously, like Jesus is the most important person, and it all kind of revolves around him. And do you think there's anything about Jesus in Ezekiel?
Yes.
Of course there is, because the entire Old Testament, even if you can't figure it out, some way, somehow, it's about Jesus. Now, I actually do think, in a sense, Jesus, if you want to say, makes an appearance in Ezekiel chapter 1. What?
Isn't he the angel of the Lord?
Oh, he is. In some books, he's the angel of the Lord. But the man that's high above the altar, remember, we'll touch on this more in a moment, but he sees a vision of God's throne room. There's God's throne, the colors, the rainbow, and high above it all is a man. Well, he doesn't tell us who the man is, but whenever you have God as a man, most people would assume it's Jesus. We'll look at that in just a second. But most Bible prophecy centers around Israel as a people. And of course here they're in judgment, and eventually they're going to be restored. And then ultimately Bible prophecy speaks about Israel being restored, fully as one nation that will never be pulled out of their land. I don't believe that has happened yet. Which is why in 1948, 1949, when the nation of Israel was reestablished, this is why, prophecy scholars, they've been excited ever since because they figure this is significant and maybe this will lead to end time events. So we're still waiting on that, but I've noticed that it's become also very popular to be against Israel. Has any one of you picked up on this? Whether it's in the news, Tucker Carlson, and there's other stuff, and people talking about how terrible Israel is, or the support of Israel is. This seems to be coming back in style, but I guess that's a different topic. But the point is, God, we do believe, is going to restore Israel. So there are things in Ezekiel that do deal with end times Bible prophecy. All right, now let me just quiz you. Give a definition for Israel. How do you define Israel? Or as he mentioned here, the house of Israel. Anyone want to give a definition?
God's chosen people.
God's chosen people.
Descendants of Abraham.
Descendants of Abraham. These are good definitions. Anyone else? Okay. Now, both are true, right? What?
One who contends with God.
Right. That's what the name Israel actually means. One who strives with God, contends with God, God's fighter. So when Jacob had his name changed to Israel, because Israel at first was a guy, Jacob. But then it's the children of Israel, like his physical children, then it turned into the nation as a whole. Millions of them. So these are good definitions, but they're also tricky definitions. So I can't just assume that everyone listening understands who or what Israel is. So Mike said God's chosen people. And he's right, because in the Old Testament, the house of it, the children of it, they were God's chosen people. We all agree with that? I don't think anyone denies that. Well, there are. I think Muslims deny that, and Black Hebrew Israelites deny. There are groups, but no Christian denies that. At the same time, who are God's people right now? Okay. Are you one of God's chosen people? Yes. If you're saved? Yes. So right now, the elect are Christians. Now, are there still Jews who believe in Jesus? And they're part of it? Yes. Is Israel God's chosen people right now? Yes. Because we do believe that there is a future for them. What?
They are the nation who God brought salvation to the earth through. So
Yep.
they're still God's chosen people.
Now, if God were completely finished with them, then you might say no, but we don't believe that God is finished with them. So I would say yes, they are, generally, corporately. But let's say a Jew, we all know some Jewish people probably. Let's say, hypothetically, a Jewish guy, and he not only rejects Jesus, he hates Jesus. Is that man one of God's chosen people?
Only God knows.
Well, he could be, because he could repent later on. So I'm not going to say he's not, but as it sits right now, he's not a believer. So in that sense, if that's how he lives his life, and that's the final verdict. Because your definition of Israel was what? God's chosen nation?
Nation through
Oh, descendants of Abraham.
descendants of Abraham.
Okay. So obviously Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob, and Jacob had his name changed to Israel, and had the 12 tribes. So yes, Israel are the descendants of Abraham. Of course, there were descendants of Abraham who were not Israelites, right? Ishmael and his descendants, well, they're not Israelites. Yep. And also there were people even in the nation of Old Testament Israel, they were not physical descendants of Abraham. Can you name, there's two that just about everybody knows. Ruth and Rahab. Okay. And there were plenty of others. But Ruth and Rahab were not physically descended from Abraham. So Israel, anyone could join the nation. So in a sense, the children of Israel were anyone who worshiped the true God and converted to the nation. Just like people can come to our country and become an American, they could go and become an Israelite. But they had to worship the true God. Okay. So that's where some of the confusion comes in, because not everyone maybe thinks of all these different definitions. And I do want to bring this up because this is common, that some people today take a different view of the identity of Israel, and they say that Israel is the church. And you can sort of see where they're coming from, because after all, we said, well, the Christians are God's chosen people. And anyone could become an Israelite if they converted and worshiped the true God, and we worship the true God. And there are explanations where some people would say that the church is the new Israel. Listen, we do not believe that's the case. Okay, the church is the church. Israel is the chosen nation of God. I do think there is a difference. For example, in the New Testament, when the Apostle Paul was speaking about the church, he called it, what? A mystery. It was something that in the Old Testament they didn't understand. So we do believe the church is distinct from Israel. All right, any questions or comments on that? If you know any Presbyterians, Reformed people, they would have a different view. So just be aware that that's out there. But who is Ezekiel addressing? Is Ezekiel addressing the church? No. He's addressing the house of Israel. Okay. And he's addressing their rebellion. He's addressing the judgment that they are experiencing. And just to give you the outline again, number one, chapters 1 through 24. I don't think I gave you the chapters. So chapters 1 through 24, Ezekiel speaks about prophecies of Jerusalem's ruin. Chapters 25 through 32 are prophecies of retribution to the nations. Chapter 33, provision for Israel's repentance. And then chapters 34 through 48 are prophecies of Israel's restoration. So when you think of the book of Ezekiel, just grand scale, what chapters do you think of? Or are there stories or passages in the book that you associate with Ezekiel?
Visions of the dry bones.
Valley of the Dry Bones, which is chapter what?
37.
37. Okay, good.
The wheel.
Wheel within the wheel.
That makes no sense to me.
Right. Which is this chapter, right?
Being taken up to heaven in the chariot of fire.
Okay. Okay. Now he does see things like this. There's the Gog and Magog, 37 through 38, right? So, what else? In chapter 10, the spirit departs from the temple, so that we'll touch on that. So there actually are some interesting things in the book of Ezekiel. It's not all most of it's super complicated, but there are some important passages. Even the whole concept of being born again. So Jesus talks about being born again in John chapter 3. And remember, Jesus says you must be born of water, the Spirit, and he's like, what does that mean? Where does that idea come from? He actually most likely got that idea from Ezekiel, because Ezekiel talks about being sprinkled with water and it making you clean, and we'll look at that as well. So it is actually a very significant book. Yes?
As God is speaking to him, he constantly refers to him as Son of Man.
Right.
You see that in other books, other than Christ referring to himself as Son of Man.
Right.
So
You're right. That's another key detail of Ezekiel. This title, which we'll talk about, that Ezekiel is called by God Son of Man. And there actually is one other prophet. I didn't realize this until studying this week, but there is one other prophet who is called Son of Man. I mean, other than Jesus calling himself that. Does anyone know who it is? I'll give you a little hint. He's also in captivity.
Elisha?
No,
Isn't it Jeremiah?
he's in Babylon. Daniel, yes, Daniel is called the Son of Man. But then Daniel also speaks about seeing a vision of the Son of Man, who is, again, almost certainly Christ. Okay, anything else that stands out in the book? All right. And again, if it seems too complicated, you listen to chapter 1, you're like, oh man, I'm just not going to get anything out of the study. It's such a drag that we have to go through Ezekiel. It probably is only going to be a month, 2 months at the most. That's my prediction. So, but on the other hand, I suspect you often come to church and hear things that it's like, well, I've heard that before. I've heard this before. I doubt you've heard a lot about Ezekiel, so there should be something new. So look at it that way. All right, let's go over with the few minutes we have remaining. Let's just go over chapter 1. So he sees the vision of God in verse 1. Verse 2, on the 5th day of the month, which was in the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity. So Jehoiachin was the second to last king. He was taken into captivity where, who was the last king of Judah? Does anyone remember?
Jehoiakim.
What?
He had a name Jehoiakim.
Well, there's Jehoiakim and then Jehoiachin. So it's Chin here. But the last king,
Was his uncle.
yeah, there's relations. The last king's, though, is Zedekiah. And the way you can remember it, Z, right? Last letter of the alphabet, Zedekiah, last king of Judah. That's how I remember it, so that should work for you. So Zedekiah is the last king. So this took place, in effect, Jehoiachin was taken captive into Babylon, and Zedekiah was established as sort of like a puppet king. So Babylon actually took the king of Judah into captivity, and they set up their own leader that's going to be favorable to them. Sort of like we do sometimes when we topple a government and put in someone else. This is what happened here. Zedekiah is the last king. So Jehoiachin's captivity, this is the 5th year. It says that in verse 3. Look at verse 3. The word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzai, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there. And who are the Chaldeans? This is just another term for the people who lived in the region known as Babylon. Okay. So then Ezekiel sees the vision of the whirlwind, which should cause you to think of who? Another prophet, Elijah, right? Who is taken up into heaven by God. So the whirlwind contained, of course, chariots of fire. Ezekiel also sees fire in verse 4. We'll close with this. And behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, and radiating out of its midst like the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. And we'll close here, but there are going to be direct connections. Next week, Lord willing, we'll talk about this, how a lot of the visions that he sees are very similar to what we read about in the book of Revelation. And of course, Revelation is the full name, the revelation of Jesus Christ. So we want to look at, going forward, how Ezekiel also reveals information that points ahead to Christ. So that'll be our mission going forward. So go ahead and read Ezekiel chapters 2, 3, and 4 this week if you would like. That would help. But that's all for today. So you're dismissed.